In linguistics, sound symbolism, phonesthesia or phonosemantics is the idea that vocal sounds or phonemes carry meaning in and of themselves. Origin: in the 18th century, Mikhail Lomonosov propagated a theory that words containing certain sounds should bear certain meanings. For instance, the front vowel sounds e, I, u should be used when depicting tender subjects and those with back vowel sounds o, u, y when describing things that may cause fear. However, it is Ferdinand de Saussure who is considered to be the founder of modern scientific linguistics. Central to what de Saussure says about words are two related statements. First, he says that the sign is arbitrary. He considers the words that we use to indicate things and concepts could be any words they are essentially just a consensus agreed upon by the speakers of a language and have no discernible pattern or relationship to the thing. Thus, the sounds themselves have no linguistic meaning. Second, he says that, because words are arbitrary, they have meaning only in relation to other words. A dog is a dog because it is not a cat or a mouse or a horse, etc. These ideas have permeated the study of words since the 19th century. Saussure himself is said to have collected examples where sounds and reference were related. Ancient traditions link sounds and meaning, and some modern linguistic research does also. Types of sound symbolism. Margaret Magnus is the author of a comprehensive book designed to explain phonosemantics to the lay reader, Gods of the Word. This work describes three types of sound symbol using a model first proposed by Wilhelm von Humboldt. Onomatopoeia equals. This is the least significant type of symbolism. It is simply imitative of sounds or suggests something that makes a sound. Some examples are crash, bang, whoosh. Clustering equals, words that share a sound sometimes have something in common. If we take, for example, words that have no prefix or suffix and group them according to meaning, some of them will fall into a number of categories. So we find that there is a group of words beginning with that are about barriers, bulges and bursting, and some other group of words that are about being banged, beaten, battered, bruised, blistered and bashed. This proportion is, according to Magnus, above the average for other letters. Another hypothesis states that if a word begins with a particular phoneme, then there is likely to be a number of other words starting with that phoneme that refer to the same thing. An example given by Magnus is if the basic word for house in a given language starts with a, then by clustering, disproportionately many words containing can be expected to concern housing, hut, home, hovel, habitat. Clustering is language dependent, although closely related languages will have similar clustering relationships. Iconism, according to Magnus, becomes apparent when comparing words which have the same sort of referent. One way is to look at a group of words that all refer to the same thing and that differ only in their sound, such as stamp, stomp, tamp, trump, tramp, and step. And before the in some words makes the action more forceful. Compare stamp with step or tamp with tap. According to Magnus, this sets the word in motion, especially after a tamp is in one place, but a tramp goes for a walk. The in all those words would be what emphasizes the individual steps. Magnus suggests that this kind of iconism is universal across languages. Phenomemes and psychomimes equals, some languages possess a category of words midway between onomatopoeia and usual words. Whereas onomatopoeia refers to the use of words to imitate actual sounds, there are languages known for having a special class of words that imitate soundless states or events, called phenomemes and psychomimes. On a scale that orders all words according to the correlation between their meaning and their sound, with the sound imitating words like meow and whack at one end, and with the conventional words like water and blue at the other end, the phonemes and the psychomimes would be somewhere in the middle. In the case of the Japanese language, for example, such words are learned in early childhood and are considerably more effective than usual words in conveying feelings and states of mind or in describing states, motions, and transformations. They are not found, however, only in children's vocabulary, but widely used in daily conversation among adults and even in more formal writing. Like Japanese, the Korean language also has a relatively high proportion of phonemes and psychomimes. History of phonosemantics. several ancient traditions exist which talk about an archetypal relationship between sounds and ideas. Some of these are discussed below, but there are others as well. If we include a link between letters and ideas, then the list includes the Viking runes, the Hebrew Kabbalah, the Arab Abjad, etc. References of this kind are very common in the Upanishads, the Nag Hammadi library, the Celtic Book of Taliesin, as well as early Christian works, the Shinto Kotatama, and Shingon Buddhism. Old Chinese Sinologist Axel Schuessler asserts that in Old Chinese, occasionally, certain meanings are associated with certain sounds. Concerning initials, he suggests that words with meanings such as dark, black, covered etc. tend to begin with M, while those indicating soft, subtle, flexible begin with N. Taking a broader perspective, he also notes that roots and stems meaning round, turn, return have an initial W not only in Chinese, but generally in the languages of the area. As for finals in Old Chinese, Schuessler points out, words that signify movement with an abrupt endpoint often end in K, and words with the meanings shutting, closing, tend to end in final P. He also notes an overlap between the significations of initial M and final M. Words that imply keeping in a closed mouth tend to end in a final M. Plato and the Cratylus dialogue In Cratylus, Plato has Socrates commenting on the origins and correctness of various names and words. When Hermogenes asks if he can provide another hypothesis on how signs come into being, Socrates initially suggests that they fit their reference in virtue of the sounds they are made of. Now the letter rho, as I was saying, appeared to the imposer of names an excellent instrument for the expression of motion. And he frequently uses the letter for this purpose. For example, in the actual words rain and row he represents motion by rho. Also in the words tromos, tracheus. And again, in words such as crowin, throin, iriakine, throptin, kermaticshain, romin, of all these sorts of movements he generally finds an expression in the letter R, because, as I imagine, he had observed that the tongue was most agitated and least at rest in the pronunciation of this letter, which he therefore used in order to express motion. Cratylus. Note this is an open-source translation available at Internet Classics Archive, however, faced by an overwhelming number of counterexamples given by Hermogenes, Socrates has to admit that my first notions of original names are truly wild and ridiculous. Upanishads The Upanishads contain a lot of material about sound symbolism. For instance, the mute consonants represent the earth, the sibilants the sky, the vowels heaven. The mute consonants represent fire, the sibilants air, the vowels the suna. The mute consonants represent the eye, the sibilants the ear, the vowels the mind. Aeteriyaka 3. 2.6.2 Shingon Buddhism Kakai, the founder of Shingon wrote his sound, word, reality in the 9th century which relates all sounds to the voice of the Dharmakaya Buddha. Early Western phonosemantics The idea of phonosemantics was sporadically discussed during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. In 1690, Locke wrote against the idea in an essay called An Essay on Human Understanding. His argument was that if there were any connection between sounds and ideas, then we would all be speaking the same language, but this is an overgeneralization. Leibniz's book New Essays on Human Understanding published in 1765 contains a point-by-point critique of Locke's essay. Leibniz picks up on the generalization used by Locke and adopts a less rigid approach. Clearly there is no perfect correspondence between words and things, but neither is the relationship completely arbitrary, although he seems vague about what that relationship might be. Modern phonosemantics In 1836 Wilhelm von Humboldt published Arbeitsweisheiten des menschlichen Sprachgebrauchs und ihren Einfluss auf die geistige Entwicklung des Menschengeschlechts. It is here that he establishes the three kinds of relationship between sounds and ideas as discussed above under types of sound symbolism. Below is a sample of researchers in the field of phonosemantics. Otto Jespersen suggests that, sound symbolism, we may say, makes some words more fit to survive. Dwight Bellinger of Harvard University was the primary proponent of phonosemantics through the late 1940s and the 1950s. In 1949, He published "The sign is not arbitrary." He concluded that morphemes cannot be defined as the minimal meaning-bearing units, in part because linguistic meaning is so ill-defined, and in part because there are obvious situations in which smaller units are meaning-bearing. Ivan Farkub-Negi correlates phonemes with metaphors. For example, nasal and velarized vowels are quite generally considered a Euro-darker Euro-unregistered trademark, front vowels as a Euro-phony Euro-unregistered trademark and a Euro-higher Euro-unregistered trademark. Unvoiced stops have been considered a Euro-thine a Euro-unregistered trademark by European linguists, whereas the fricatives were labeled a Euro-row a Euro-unregistered trademark and a Euro-I a Euro-unregistered trademark by the Greeks. Hans Marchand provided the first extensive list of English phonesthemes. He wrote, for example, that at the end of a word symbolizes prolongation, continuation, or nasals at the end of a word express continuous vibrating sounds. Gar copyright Rajanet published the only full-length history of phonosemantics, mimologics. In 450 pages, Janet details the evolution of the linguistic iconism among linguists and poets, in syntax, morphology and phonology. Linguist Keith McCune demonstrated in his doctoral thesis that virtually every word in the Indonesian language has an iconic component. His two-volume doctoral thesis The Internal Structure of Indonesian Roots was completed at the University of Michigan in 1983 and published in Jakarta in 1985. Relationship with neuroscience. In the 2003 BBC Reith Lectures, Vilayana S. Ramachandran outlined his research into the links between brain structure and function. In the fourth lecture of the series he describes the phenomena of synesthesia in which people experience, for example, sounds in terms of colors, or sounds in terms of tastes. In one type of synesthesia, people see numbers, letters of the alphabet, or even musical notes as having a distinct color. Ramachandran proposes a model for how language might have evolved. The theory may explain how humans create metaphors and how sounds can be metaphors for images why for example sounds can be described as bright, or dull. In explaining how language might have evolved from cross-activation of adjacent areas in the brain, Ramachandran notes four crucial factors, not all related to language, but which combined might have resulted in the emergence of language. Two of these four processes are of particular interest here. Synesthetic cross-modal abstraction, that is we recognize properties that sounds and images have in common and abstract them to store them independently. The sounds and shapes of the objects have characteristics in common that can be abstracted. For example, a sharp, cutting quality of a word, and the shape it describes. Ramachandran calls this the bouba key effect, based on the results of an experiment with two abstract shapes, one blob-like and the other spiky, that asked people to relate the nonsense words bouba and key to them. The effect is real and observable, repeatable across linguistic groups, and evident even in the description of the experiment. Built-in pre-existing cross-activation. Ramachandran points out that areas of the brain which appear to be involved in the mix-ups in synesthesia are adjacent to each other physically, and that cross-wiring, or cross-activation, could explain synesthesia and our ability to make metaphors. He notes that the areas that control the muscles around the mouth are also adjacent to the visual centers, and suggests that certain words appear to make our mouth imitate the thing we are describing. Examples of this might be words like teeny-weeny, diminutive to describe small things, large, or enormous to describe big things. More recently, research on idesthesia indicated that key and bouba have an entire semantic-like network of associated cross-modal experiences. Relationship with poetry. The sound of words is important in the field of poetry, and rhetoric more generally. Tools such as euphony, alliteration, and rhyme all depend on the speaker or writer confidently choosing the best-sounding word. John Mitchell's book Euphonics, A Poet's Dictionary of Enchantments collects lists of words of similar meaning and similar sounds. For example, the entry for V begins, vital and vigorous but vain and vicious. Vitality is in words which relate to the Latin vita, vis and vigor. In English are vim and vigor, vitality and velocity. The effect of V can be described as very vivacious, like several other sounds V has a second, opposite meaning. In accordance with its relationship to the sounds W and F, it is sometimes weak and flustered, as in the words vain, vacuous, vapid, vague, vacillate, vagrant, vaporous, vertigo, veer, and very. Likewise, GL words for shiny things, glisten, gleam, glint, glare, glam, glimmer, glaze, glass, glitz, gloss, glory, glow, and glitter. In German, nouns starting with no and na paragraph are mostly small and round, Nobruch garlic, na paragraph Chelankel, na paragraph Del dumpling, Nol tuber, not button, nor and not, Knas bud, no ten not. Using commas, phonesthesia is used in commas for the names of products and even companies themselves. According to linguist Steven Pinker, one particularly egregious example was when cigarette maker Philip Morris rebranded to Altria. The name Altria is claimed to come from the Latin word for high, but Pinker sees the change as an attempt to switch its image from bad people who sell addictive carcinogens to a place or state marked by altruism and other lofty values. See also, idesthesia, ideophone, imitation of natural sounds in various cultures, Japanese sound symbolism, onomatopoeia, origin of speech, phonosemantic matching, phone's theme, phonesthetics. External links: Margaret Magnus's Phonosemantics website, phonosemantics.com website, The Influence of Phonesthesia on the English Language, an Alternative Approach to Phonosemantics. Cratylus Dialogue, Reference and Symbol in Plato's Cratylus and Quequaishojidisoji Philosophy East and West Volume 32-4, BBC Reith Lectures 2003, especially Lecture 4, Purple Numbers and Sharp Cheese. An example of phonosemantics in advertising, oral metaphor construct Asa Emstpak, and use generic sound symbolism for the blind seeing with sound, conversational grunts, eating the wind. A satirical but illustrative example of sound symbolism and iconicity using airstream mechanisms. Phonological clusters of semantically similar words, comparison of dirty words in Chinese and English, La Cavernas and Nora Miguel and Gelmendo, The Lost Words of Life and Death. Sources: Jacobson, Roman. War, Linda. The Sound Shape of Language. Walter de Guita. ISBN 978-3-11-017285-0. Magnus, Margaret. Gods in the Word, Archetypes in the Consonants. CreateSpace. ISBN 978-1-4538-2444-3. Mitchell, John. Euphonics, A Poet's Dictionary of Enchantments. Wooden Books. ISBN 978-1-904263-43-2. Schuessler, Axel. ABC Etymological Dictionary of Old Chinese. Honolulu, University of Hawaii Press. ISBN 978-0-8248-2975-9. Further reading: Hinton, L., J. Nichols and J. J. Waller, 1994. Sound Symbolism. Cambridge, Cambridge University Press.